I kind of want to start off with a little bit of, I guess, sort of a vlog of sorts, but really just sort of um, just talking about some aspects of Fallout 4 and I guess Bethesda games in general. I do believe I touched upon this a little bit in my Skyrim playthrough in the early parts. Where I was talking about how Bethesda tends to do setting up your character, and sort of the origin story. Um, I would say that Fallout 4 is probably the worst in a fair number of ways. Um, because, I go back to Morrowind. I think the two games of, I guess the ones that are basically published by Bethesda, one of which is by the actual, Todd Howard group. Morrowind, I think, had a really good setup for role playing. Uh, that you were all that's really established is that you were taken from the Imperial City's prison to Morrowind, and you hear this. You have this dream at the beginning, and the only real indication that you have some sort of greater destiny is the introduction, where um, the Daedric Prince Azura is saying that is sort of alluding to the fact that you have been chosen or something like that. I can't remember what it is, um, but um, like that she's watchful and all of that. Um, but I mean, it's basically a dream sequence, and you can kind of write it off as just that. That it was just some weird dream you had. Um, and all you're really given with regard to going into the main quest is that you have this package that you're supposed to deliver to this guy. Uh, and there's no real urgency to that, per se. Like you can kind of make your own urgency. You can be like, uh, it's a lot more open to the idea that you don't have to get on this. You can be like a more heroic character. It, lawful good, and at least in some regards. Like I guess you might not be entirely lawful if you're just shrugging off this mandate from the blades, but um, you could kind of play around that a little bit, and be like, well, I have this second chance. You could say that you were imprisoned falsely and such. Like that's always something you can kind of do to some degree in Elder Scrolls games. Although in Skyrim, like I said, the whole fact that when you talk about the fact that you were had your head on the block, he says you're forthright about your criminal past. I didn't really care for that. That it. Um, I mean, yeah, I suppose that the all would maybe read that into just me plain saying that, but it would be I would almost rather have the option at that point to interject to say, oh no, I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know. And then he could be like, well, be that as it may, blah blah blah, um, and I'm just being forthright about that. Maybe, um, maybe a little too forthright about the fact that I was kind of about to be executed, but I'm just a little sore about that. It was the whole idea of studying that line. Uh, I think I still do. I think sometimes I I did it last time, obviously. Uh, Mainly just so I could complain about it. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing a little bit here. I felt that starting with Oblivion, and I guess we could go back like to like Daggerfall. Uh, I think Daggerfall and Arena kind of not really dug into them as much. Um, like I think in Daggerfall, like you're not like I think it's the one game in the mainline series where you aren't a prisoner to start out with. Um, like you're basically I think you are like a Blades agent basically. So it's sort of well established who you are and what your connections are. So, but you can still live it within the framework of being a Blades agent. Um, you can still like have some leeway to be like, well, this is what my character's background is. You know, how did he become a Blade? You know, I guess like it essentially has to be a little more elaborate, I suppose, just to it has this a destination point that maybe only makes sense under particular you know um, you can get kind of creative with it, but like it's not quite the same as being a prisoner, because like being a prisoner is like you don't necessarily. I mean, you would think at some level like you had to be a criminal, and I guess there is a degree to which you would have to be. I think Skyrim probably did the best job with regard to um, that aspect of it in some regards, just because it's actually like the circumstances of you being arrested are actually like fleshed out, which actually kind of helps in some ways. That like there was I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it was like some Stormcloaks attempting to cross the border into Cyrodiil, I think. Um, I think that might be what it was, and like you were just kind of, at least potentially in the area. And I think there was one of the other guys was trying to steal a horse, and so he was like clearly at the very least a criminal. You may have just been, there. Like you can literally play as you were just in the wrong, like literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's actually kind of cool because you don't have to necessarily work out some elaborate story to how you came to be arrested. That necessarily has like some implications that just aren't there in the game. Like that is somewhat the problem with Oblivion, particularly. I think more so than Morrowind, because in Morrowind, like you were taken from the Imperial City, so like whatever happened to you happened, there. So whatever got you in prison happened far away from where you are now. Is what I'm saying. So you can. You don't even really have to suspend your disbelief that like this whatever you did before is going to come back to bite you, or if a scenario landed you in jail would come back to bite you, because basically as soon as you're free of prison in Oblivion, even though you were more than likely arrested in Cyrodiil, whatever, I mean it feasibly could have happened in another province. But then you had to kind of wonder, like, then you have, like, the problem that why would it be so bad that it would, send you to the Imperial City prison instead of, like, the local prison in the other province? Um, you know, um, and couldn't it still, if it was that bad, then couldn't it still, like, come back to bite you? So there's always that question, I guess, for some people who think too deeply into it, like me, where like you're just completely pardoned from whatever the heck you did or were accused of, And if it's a matter of you being accused of a crime you did not commit, then what was the crime? What are the people who were affected by the crime? Like, aren't they going to be coming after you? Or maybe the people who said, maybe you were framed. Maybe that was the story you want to go with. Well, who framed you and why? And how is that gonna? How would that, play into? Um, how would you? How is that going to continue to affect you? Because these people still want to, like, either, I don't know. Like, I guess you could say, like, on some level, that they might just be like, well, you were just pardoned, and like they might actually be almost relieved that you were pardoned because maybe they. I don't know. I don't know if they would be relieved that you're pardoned because it means that you might actually come after them. Um, but I mean, if they had like any, if it was weighing at their conscience on their conscience at all, then maybe they would be relieved in some part. But then they're like maybe a little bit worried about like, hey, is this guy gonna come after me? Or a girl, or woman, man, whatever your character happens to be. Lizard. Um. Anyway, I'm going off on like a incredible tangent now. I tend to do that. Um, that would be kind of just interesting. I mean, from just a standpoint in terms of like a story. That like a character could like on one hand like the part of them that maybe has a bit of a conscience is like that I put this innocent person in jail just to get out of the crime I committed. Would be like, oh well, they're pardoned now, but like that doesn't mean that they're suddenly innocent. So the crime is still technically pinned on them. But now I don't have to worry about an innocent person being in prison. Maybe it even like happened briefly enough that they might even think like they might not hold a grudge, and heck, they might not even know that I'm the one who actually did it. Uh, Hopefully they won't be too curious to like investigate. But yeah, like there's no real repercussions to that scenario, and it doesn't entirely make sense that there wouldn't be. You just have to like mod it into the game yourself if you're playing on PC. But yeah, in Skyrim, you have some wiggle room. At the very least, if you're playing someone who's technically innocent, you can just be like, it was an honest mistake here, sort of, and even if you were someone who was guilty of something, there's still, I guess, maybe a little bit of an implication that you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. You just happen to also be a criminal, or Um, but regardless, I think it was handled well there. And of course, in terms of being able to have freedom within your role playing, that's kind of the other aspect of it. It is not only do you have to establish your backstory, but you have to establish where is your character going to go from the following the intro, the tutorial, or whatever. In Morrowind, you you have this vague idea like you're supposed to talk to this guy, but you can kind of shrug it off a little bit. Like you could be like, I don't want to be involved in this, and there's a degree to which you can, I think, even just deliver the package to him, and like, he gives you an assignment, but like you can just be like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I did what I was asked, and now I'm going to go about my business. And like even with main quest, it takes a while for the stakes to suddenly become clear. So you can basically roleplay blissfully ignorant, like you're supposed to be in an Evermarine. You know, and heck, as far as the game is concerned in a number of ways, it doesn't even really matter whether you're in the Nether Arena or not. You know, you can realistically play it without that in mind at all. Um, I think second to that, and it's not like by Bethesda Game Studios, but Fallout New Vegas did, I think, a fairly good job. I mean, you can easily, like, for one, the tutorial section is very brief. It's very Morrowind-esque. I think it's you're in this sort of processing center. You don't really have a dungeon, like an opening dungeon that you have to crawl through every time you want to start a new game. Um, which is, I think, probably one of the bigger problems of Oblivion is that the opening dungeon to Oblivion is really large. Um, I think in part probably because of the whole mechanic where it tries to determine like what class you're playing, which actually does make it a little fun. It does add some replay value to the opening dungeon, but it still doesn't keep it from becoming a bit of a slog. It's a bit fun to try and role play a particular class in the intro and see if the game correctly guesses what you're trying to role play. Like, I do think there is some fun in that and a bit of replay value, but it's also still, after like a few times playing through it, it's not even necessarily worth it for that. Anyway, New Vegas, I think, it just sort of drops you into the world, and you have this guy who tried to kill you. You're not really sure why. I think you may have a little bit of amnesia. Your courier. I don't know if you completely have like no memory of your life prior, but you could be like remembering things as you go, and you probably still have enough of your personality retained, that like the aspects that led you to have that personality, you can kind of flesh those things out. And things that your character might start to remember, if they start to recover the memory at some point. Um, so you can kind of develop that if you want to, and moving forward, like, you can kind of just go out there and do whatever the heck you want, and you have this goal, but like there's no real rush to it. Beyond, I guess he could get away, but then again, he thinks you're dead. At the same time, he probably thinks you're dead. So, like, word might get to him that you're alive, but it might. I don't know. I don't remember. Uh, but still, not like they have the internet, so like Anyway, it does a pretty good job with regard to keeping the stakes relatively low. And, I mean, stakes are personal in a number of ways, but you could still, like, role play in the sense that, like, your character just doesn't sweat it, or something, that they don't really care too much. Like, they literally come back from, like, the dead, effectively, and they're just gonna live life foolish, or they're as foolish as you can in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. So you have some freedom to like do whatever you want and not feel too bad about it, basically. Whereas in Skyrim, just a freaking dragon. Dragons haven't been around in literally eras, ages. Um, um, and warning Whiterun about it is kind of important to some degree, you know. So if you just shrug that off, granted, the whole dragons coming back and forth plot line doesn't really kick in until a couple questions of that, so you can just go in there, get the weak fall barrel assignment. You may not even get it. Like you may just like be like, no, I'm out. You know, like I did my duty. I reported the dragon. I'm just gonna go about my business. You can kind of do that, but not feel like too bad of a person because like you don't know that you're the Dovahkiin and you don't know that like you are the one hope, you know, to save the land from the dragons. Like as far as you're aware, like you just got out of there. So they did an okay job of that, but I do think the stakes escalate a little too quickly. You know, because like if you're role playing an adventurous type, which you almost certainly are, like it's like oh like I'm gonna delve into this dungeon and it's gonna be fun. You know it's gonna help them figure out things about dragons, and then suddenly there's a dragon attack. Suddenly you find out you're Dovahkiin, and then now like your responsibilities and your stakes are like this much higher, and you can't just like um, like you had to kind of apply your metagame knowledge at that point and just be like, well, for whatever reason, my character doesn't want to go into this whole Bleak Falls Barrow thing, or or turn that in or whatever, because on metagame level that's when like shit starts getting real, Um, but anyway, let's go into Fallout games now. I don't think I talked too much about the Fallout games in Skyrim, probably because it was Skyrim. So now I'm talking too much about the Elder Scrolls games when I'm talking about Fallout thing. Um, no, I should make this like a separate part just to uh, separate the vlog from the actual gameplay. Um, but yeah, Fallout 3, just to kind of go in brief, I think for the series, it isn't that much of. It's not too terrible. I mean, you've always had, I think, again, not having played much into of the. Uh, I think I played Fallout 1 for a little bit and couldn't really get into it because like it's just. Uh, I mean, eventually I may try to actually seriously get into some of the older Fallout games, but like they're just older games that are for PC. Never really played PC games that much, at least in the early days. You know, the only computer I ever had for a long time was a Commodore 64, which my dad got from the library where he worked. So, with like I think a fairly steep discount. Um, there were some good games on it, but it was like keyboard and mouse. So playing a game in that fashion is really with. Uh, that kind of interface where everything is like really complicated and it fully takes advantage of like there's almost no way it could really feasibly be ported to a console. Although like a lot of RTS games did manage, at least in the PlayStation era, to get ported to consoles, and even now like we get like XCOM, although the newest one took a little while to get to consoles, but um, that's neither here nor there. Um, uh, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I might seriously try. Maybe like when I get like an actual like streaming setup, I might like try to stream it or something to and like see how that goes. But um, Anyway, uh, like I think the original one was like you had to get like a water chip for your vault. That's how it starts, and the stakes are relatively low, which is kind of good. Um, I mean, the personal stakes are high, but and that's perhaps a bit problematic. But I mean, and in terms of like fleshing out your character's history, like it's not quite as good as like New Vegas, because like in New Vegas, like maybe the first game where like your character doesn't come from a necessarily Fallout 2 might be like I think like you come from some sort of a tribe that like descended from the Vault Dweller of the first game. Um, I think is the general idea of it. Um, but um, I think it's maybe established some degree. You sort of just lived in that tribe your entire life. Now you're actually like going out into the world, and the same thing can be said for like definitely be said for like Fallout, the original Fallout, and Fallout 3 and 4. Is that like you basically start out in a vault and like you lived in isolation and you're kind of new to the wasteland, in general. Uh, and in terms of from a narrative standpoint, that's like really interesting, and from a standpoint of I suppose establishing your character as being level 1 and sort of a newbie, it works, That is sort of the problem with a lot of role-playing games. If you want to give your character like an interesting backstory where they actually have done things and maybe done some adventuring and such prior, it had to kind of. It's kind of like the problem that happened with Callista is that she supposedly is actually like a couple centuries or so old, over a couple centuries old. Like she lived in the time of like the Nereid and then the Oblivion Crisis. So she actually lived through that, although like no one acknowledges it whatsoever. Like when they talk about old events, it's like, oh, that's before your time. Like, no, I was there. Like I'm an elf. Like I can live long, and she's kind of a mage, so like she could live a very long time. Granted, that said, you had to suspend your disbelief that like she would be a level 1 character to start. That like her magical abilities would not be more developed, especially if she managed to live that long, Although I did like establish that she kind of like was maybe even a little bit upper class, and she sort of maybe her family fell out of favor. It's in some recent history, and now she's just kind of on her own. That's sort of a general idea I have of her, what her backstory might have been. But it's a little immersion breaking at a point when people say, "Oh, it's before your time." Like, I mean, I don't know what I expect Bethesda to do about that. Like, if you're playing an elf, the dialogue would be just changed to that may have been before your time. Or I'm guessing that was before your time. I mean, I guess Callisto could take it as a compliment that people think she looks young. But whatever. Um, I mean, for me, it was just I don't know. It's someone who was around during all of the Elder Scrolls games that I have played. Uh, is I guess the point. Anyway, going back to Fallout. Fallout 3, you start in the vault. Like your entire history from birth is basically kind of plotted out. Um, Although you can kind of fill in the gaps and like say your character developed a certain personality while they lived in the vault, and you know maybe you should even come up with some things that happened while they were in the vault, but you're still restricted to being in the vault. Like you couldn't have done like been like a mercenary or whatever. Um, Again, they're at the same time, especially with Fallout, actually, because you are like established as having a particular set of skills that can make life a living hell for. Oh wait, I'm just saying it because Liam Neeson is in the game. uh, but yeah, there is that element I think to just about any role playing game, even you know something that's like so dedicated to role playing, like a tabletop game like Dungeons and Dragons, where like okay, your character's level 1, and if you created an elaborate backstory for them, like you had to like wonder like why exactly are they level 1 to start? I mean, sometimes you can go into a campaign and be a higher level character. And sometimes the DM will allow that, or even encourage that, or even want that, just because they want to have players who have a more well thought out backstory, and they want these well thought out backstories to kind of uh, uh, make sense in terms of like what skills they would begin the game with. You know, um, but you can also say that like level 1 is in effect an expression of everything you've been through up to this point. Like you still have skills that must have taken like a long time to develop. Prior, like you basically have like negative levels that can sort of apply to any old NPC on the street. Um, Hypothetically anyway. Um, like a lot of people might be like negative level 10, or something. Um, or basically like, the leveling system isn't applied to them because they aren't adventurers. Um, um, so there is a bit of restriction to like what you can establish as your character's backstory. Now in Fallout 4, I think it's probably has the biggest problem, and I think I started with saying it has the biggest problem. It has lots of problems with regard to trying to really seriously roleplay. Granted, it's not impossible, and it can. There's definitely a fair number of dialogue options that can kind of establish what your character's personality is. Like your personality isn't exactly fixed, but in terms of like establishing a backstory, you're strangely less restricted in some ways and more restricted in others. Um, because I think like each of the two potential protagonists are effectively like their backstories are like actually established, or at least implied to a fairly large degree. Like the male protagonist was a soldier, military, ex-military. The female protagonist was a lawyer, I believe. Like you see, like I think they have like a law degree in like and like the folded American flag in their home. So I do believe that's like the established thing. For Almira, it's a little weird. Um, I mean, for one, I'm shoehorning a character who was designed for a fantasy setting into um, a universe like Fallout. Um, I'm not sure if she's a vampire. Like, there's like an alternative story that I could develop for her. Right now, the theme is that she's a vampire, um, in the video titles and such. Um, but the other idea is that she may have like taken part in some kind of experiment that would, um, cause, like the idea I have right now is that her being a lawyer is just kind of a more recent development in her life, um, and um, she's actually in truth a former assassin, just like Almira used to be an assassin before she took up more of a rogue like occupation. So this is a work in progress, but like she was an assassin for the government, and maybe she took part in somehow she I suppose it would have like realistically had to have happened like from a young age, like the age that she appears to be. So somehow she ended up being enrolled into this program where they basically stunted her growth to make her the perfect assassin. To make her a Babette, basically. It was Project Babette, even though there was no Babette in maybe Skyrim was a game in the Elder Scrolls universe. I don't know. Not the Elder Scrolls, the Fallout universe. That like it was an actual like holotape. Although the games never got that advanced. I don't know. Like it could have been a holotape game. Like it would have been a very different game because it has some of the graphical limitations there. But Babette was a character, and like I don't know, the government decided to call it name it after her because they just like played the game and there's Babette and they're like, that's a really cool idea. Let's try and do this with science. Like let's make someone who's like eternally in the body of a young girl, and then train her to be an assassin. And I guess she might even be a bit like Black Widow. A bit of Black Widow in there too. I think. I heard exactly what her. I think the idea was that like she was like trained from a very young age. So like Almira was also trained from a very young age, and she was like stuck like that. So like once she like left the program and like I guess they canceled it or something happened that basically ended the program, or maybe she just wanted out or she wanted to retire. I guess she is actually a lot older than she looks, substantially more older than she looks. So she was actually like literally old enough to retire. It's just like that the organization was maybe a little bit weird about that because like, yeah, but you're still like physically fit. It's just like she was like maybe a little bored with it, and she wanted to try and live an ordinary life, and she actually was surprisingly successful in doing that. Like very somewhat well adjusted for, like well adjusted enough to like meet her husband, and maybe her husband was also like a member of the program. I mean, it kind of has to be just from like what happened in the game. Granted, living in a suburban environment as an adult in a child's body, like there is a fair amount of suspension of disbelief which comes with the idea. Well, I mean, the idea of this whole, not only the idea that there's this like program that could like get them like stuck, basically render them immortal and stuck in the body of a child, without any like serious negative side effects. But also that they would be totally fine living in a suburban environment without anybody like being like, what are these kids doing with a baby? I mean, she may have actually like maybe this all happened like after puberty, so like she can actually bear children, although it may be a little tricky. She managed to get through it. Like maybe she has enough like of a probably accelerate from her job as a lawyer now, and whatever the government funds that she might receive from her time as an assassin. Um, I could almost make that into an entirely separate part, just going into gameplay, because this is actually relevant to the playthrough. Um, but yeah, I might do that. I'll just like go over it again. Um, we'll see you in shortly.